Doesn't matter where we go when we find the recovery that we've been looking for. I want to share with you real quickly an email as well from our own state staff. This is an email that was just recently sent out to the club of this year from Dr. Stephen Hall, who is our Department of Corrections chaplain here in Indiana. I invited him to be here to be introduced as well, but he's on vacation. It says, Larry, thanks for your kind words. I really do appreciate the ministry of Celebrate Recovery Inside, and lately we are starting to connect the dots a little better to the outside. For instance, in southwestern Indiana, we have partnered with an organization called Churches Embracing Offenders, who works with a network of 117 churches in Evansville and surrounding counties to match re-entering ex-offenders with monitoring teams from congregations in addition to the monitoring component, or mentoring component, The participants must agree to complete several different programs, one of which is Celebrate Recovery. This approach is producing some good success stories, and we hope to replicate the model in other areas of the state. I would like to ask a favor of you, and he goes on to talk about getting more DOC facilities involved, but what I wanted to share with you is the support that we just have very, very blessed with here in Indiana from the state chaplain on down. It's just been phenomenal, and if he weren't on vacation this week, he'd be here to join us as well. He's even involved in a community of churches reaching out to help re-entering offenders into the communities and piloting a program that he's designing to help do that. So we really want to thank Dr. Stephen Hall as well. Now, so you've seen a model of the faith-based therapeutic community, which is our first bullet point. And really these faith-based therapeutic communities can do Celebrate Recovery 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at times within these facilities. And even have their own team. The TEAM can be in place within the leadership inside the prison. Now, initially to get started, we don't recommend that the M or the ministry leader is someone from within the prison to begin with until they've had the right training. But as we've seen in the video with the training that occurred, and over time their leaders developed, and you do want to allow this program to grow within the facility and those people in the facility to grow with the program. Now the next bullet point is faith-based units with full-time Christian programming. And again, using CR and other compatible programs, local CR ministry volunteers can be utilized to help facilitate the basic DNA of CR step study or open share groups. The full-time Christian programming may contain other such material as experiencing God, experiencing the heart of Jesus, or other material which equips them with life skills. Now, while we're still on this bullet point, I also want to show you and introduce to you the inside version of Pastor Rick Warren's book, Purpose-Driven Life. This is available on paperback for very low cost. Zondervan Publishing really literally only charges Purpose-Driven what it costs to print these books. And this is the paperback version of that book. It even says on the back cover, it says, a gift to our brothers and sisters in prison across the top. So Pastor Rick even designed this. It's the same book, word for word. So this is another alternative. Inmates have nothing but time on their hands. So this is another alternative to fill their time with some more other types of Christian programming that are available. As well as the book written by John Baker, Life's Healing Choices. This is phenomenal. Now this book as well is available in other forms. This is the hardback version. This one's kind of very close to me because Pastor John even autographed it for me on the inside. But this is a phenomenal book that is also another alternative to good, strong Christian programming to offer to people inside to help fill their time. As we move on to the next bullet point, non-faith-based substance abuse housing units with secular programming. Secular programs may offer CR and other faith-based compatible programs. Local CR ministry volunteers or program staff may be utilized to help facilitate the basic DNA of CR training, CR step study, or open share groups. The full-time secular programming may contain other such materials as Beat the Streets, Recovery Dynamics, Domestic Violence, Fatherhood, or other material intended to promote positive life skills within their community inside. Then as we move on to the next bullet point, faith-based units with part-time programming. The inmates work or go to school daily. You'll find this very prevalent here in Indiana, and many states have jobs available for the inmates to occupy their time with as well. It's beneficial to them to get into that routine of having a job and being functional, sort of like, we would like for them to be functional in society as well. But depending on the amount of time allotted to programming, which usually is during the evening hours or weekends when they're not working, other curriculum may be used with that also reinforces positive behavior changes. And I'd like to mention at this point also the Kairos and the Great Banquet community are just very strong in this area as well. I was very blessed to experience a Kairos weekend earlier this year at one of our facilities, and it's a fantastic program as well, and it's a very good complement to what Celebrate Recovery does inside also. So as we move on to the next bullet point, chapel CR programs, which can be 1 or 2 weekly sessions. This approach consists of 1 or 2 weekly sessions, worship, open share group session, and a CR step study session, if time permits. If 1 weekly session is provided, an adjustment can be made to alternate weekly share groups and step study groups that can each include worship. Prisons that house long-term serving inmates may utilize trained inmates to facilitate CR when there is a local CR ministry volunteer coaching their assistants. As we go on to the next page, jails that house short-term serving inmates must rely on local ministry volunteers to facilitate the program's large group, share group, and step study programs involving the inmates as much as possible. Now, when you're in a short-term facility like a detention center at a county level, the average stay of time for an inmate there, an offender there, is 3 months. Now, there is a way to crunch the curriculum of Celebrate Recovery, the 25 lessons we're going to talk about here in a minute. I'm going to show you some of the materials. But to crunch those 25 lessons into a 13-week period, if all you have is an hour and a half once a week for programming. So we're going to cover that, but it's a challenge in a very short-term environment, a detention center like a jail, and you want to focus on the 25 lessons which support the 12 steps and the 8 principles of the program. If you're crunched for time, that's what you want to focus on. So here's some suggestions for programming as we move on to the next slide. And please note, this is very important, keep going, that every prison or detention center is different, every one of them. Indiana's got standard operating procedures manuals for all the DOC facilities, and especially at the county level, every county jail is different. So one thing to keep in mind going into this is humble is good. It's their house, it's their rules. We're there to play by what they require of us. Celebrate Recovery has been fantastic with understanding the facility challenges that we're also going to discuss. But with those facility challenges, you've got to just mold to what they give you. And every facility is different. You can get used to having certain correctional officers at the checkpoint every week, and then the next week you go in and that correctional officer is on vacation that you've gotten used to, and then all of a sudden things are totally different. So you've got to keep this in mind. This is a huge rule to keep in mind. So even if you weren't able to print this bulletin, write this on a notepad somewhere in very large print to keep in mind yourself as a volunteer, that every one of these facilities is different. No matter how much they try to follow the same rules, they interpret those rules differently, and we have to abide by what they tell us. Okay, so that's the first point to note. The second part of this slide is 7-day-a-week programming. The optimum setting would allow CR programming every day. We saw that in the Sierra Conservation video. They had CR programming every day, 7 days a week, and that's obviously the optimum setting. Okay. Unfortunately, we'll go on to the next bullet point. You usually come down to where some institutions limit Celebrate Recovery programming to 1 hour a week, or perhaps once a month, coupled with a continuous turnover of their inmate population. This model is also an exception. However, most programming, the next bullet point as well, is somewhere in between. Most of the programming, when Ohio was first developing their CR Inside program, the rep there called me and he said, Larry, I've got a prison that only wants to allow us to come in 1 hour a month. Do you think it's really worth it? And I said, well, you know, if you've got your foot in the door, then it's a start. Go, and if all they give you is an hour, then go and do it and see what happens. So he went for the hour, and it was about a 45-minute drive to the facility for him to return home, and he had a message on his answering machine before he got home from the chaplain from his first meeting, inviting him back the very next week. It stayed as an hour for a period of time, and then they increased it to 2 hours. So what you will find most of the time is somewhere in between 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and once a month. Somewhere in between that is where most of the facilities are going to fall. And once again, it's got to be about fitting to what they give you for programming. Not going in to say, here's what we want to do, here's what we want to give you, here's what Celebrate Recovery is designed to do. But go and talk with the facility and find out what they're looking for and try to mold the program to what they need. And that's far more receptive to a facility than trying to tell them what we're going to do. Note, new participants must begin with step 1, okay, principle 1. Now, I'm going to show you some of the programming materials in just a minute, but step 1 obviously is denial. So if you don't cover that lesson in the beginning with most people and skip over that, you're missing a very integral part of them coming out of their denial and into their recovery. So please remember that. And then the last bullet point, I believe, for this slide is any program space limitations. Now, you know, some of the questions you might ask when you talk with the facility about possibly having this program is how long will the average inmate participate in CR large group step studies or CR large group meetings? Second question might be, will inmates sign a written agreement to complete the step study or to attend? Most facilities require a gate pass or a sign-in sheet that is required for them to even be released from the block to go to the meeting. The gate pass is also required for you to have to get your materials into the building. So when you're talking with the facility, you want to make sure that they understand the type of material you'll be bringing in to teach the classes. Number 3 would be how often and how long will the institution allow for weekly or monthly programming. Some of the institutions here in Indiana, some have kind of started recycling after a 1-year program, award a certificate for 1-year completion of the program, then they take a little break for maybe a month while that sign-in sheet is reformed for the next group, and then they go through another year-long program. Some go ahead and allow new people to come in, and as I've already stated, every facility is different. So kind of mold to what they give you, but also at the same time when they give you that freedom to make some of those decisions, just like somewhat a step study should be closed after the 4th step, you may want to stop taking new attendees into the CR groups after the 4th step lesson. The 4th thing is how much programming space is available. There's so many different variations, and they're almost as different as the facilities are. You can be given a conference room, you can be given a chapel, you can be given small meeting rooms, you can be given the cafeteria has been used. I mean, there's so many different space places and limitations to those spaces. So these are other questions to ask the facility when you first meet with them about what space will we be given. The 5th thing is what equipment or Celebrate Recovery materials will be allowed into the facility. Now, when I'm talking about equipment, in teaching Celebrate Recovery myself in facilities, I typically take in my laptop, which has the lessons downloaded onto the laptop, a set of computer speakers, a computer projector, and that's typically all I need. You do have to have the gate pass with the facility, usually 2 weeks in advance prior to going to the facility. And if you show up at the facility with something that's not on the gate pass, expect not to be able to take it in with you. It's better even if you show up with something not on the gate pass as far as your equipment and materials. It's better to tell them. You have a better chance of them allowing it into the facility at that point than if you just try to sneak it in and they catch you with something that's not on the gate pass. They are definitely not going to allow you to take it in then. So make sure that it's set up and approved for what equipment and materials that you'll be allowed to take in as well in advance of whatever the facility requires Most of the facilities in Indiana for DOC require a 2-week window of notification for the gate pass for the meetings. Now once you get the gate pass established for your equipment and your materials, it can be a rolling gate pass at that point that you just renew and continue to, usually it's done by email now, notifying the facility that yes, this is still the same equipment, or with a slight exception of this, or we're going to change, we're not going to have this, or whatever. And another rule of thumb with the gate pass is to always list more than you need. You can take less. You don't have to have everything on the gate pass that you've put on the gate pass, but you can't get there with more than you've put on the gate pass. So I've always listed more than I needed, and then I know I'm covered with whatever I've got to have. Okay, now the next slide is going to take us into program components. Celebrate Recovery has 3 distinct.
I'm going to take a quick 1-minute break. I want to try to work on we're having a little echo with your sound, so I'm going to do a quick switch. So everyone, we're going to take about a 1-minute break here while I do some swapping of some cables. So just bear with us for 1 second. Thanks.
Okay, so we're back. We're trying a new version of what our configuration is here, so bear with us. They're doing a great job. So Celebrate Recovery has 3 distinct components that are often accomplished in the institutional setting. First component, next bullet point, is worship. Now I love it that worship is the first component. Worship is typically held once a week during the CR large group and consists of 3 to 4 recovery-based worship songs. Worship time is followed with a prayer reciting the 12 steps or 8 principles, presentation of a lesson from the leader's guide or testimony by local CR ministry volunteers or inmates, serenity prayer, and closing song. Now that wraps up your first hour. If only one, a single hour or 90-minute weekly session is available, a shorter worship time, followed by step study or lesson testimony and share group can be utilized. The number of worship songs should be adjusted to accommodate the other components. Now I'm going to show you some of the materials now that we're talking about, because we're getting into that point that I actually want you to see what they look like. So as we talk about worship being the first component, many of the church programs use this. This is called an iWorship DVD. It's www.iworshipnow.com, and these are sort of like sing-along. They have the lyrics. They have a beautiful video that plays with the lyrics at the bottom of the screen, and these can be used for worship. In the event that you do not have a live worship team in-house at the facility to be able to do worship, these are fantastic. Now a lot of people, and I don't like to say that there's only one way to do this, a lot of people now are even getting permission from the facilities to take iPods into the facility with a set of speakers, or the smartphones with a set of speakers, and just pulling up YouTube videos. Thank you, Paul. And that works equally as well. Again, keep in mind that you want to give as much control of the program as possible to the inmates and to the participants as you can. I learned a very valuable lesson teaching Celebrate Recovery in one of our facilities here in Indiana. I faithfully, and I'll use the term religiously, used the iWorship DVDs, and one day while teaching the program, the power went out. Now it can be very dark in a prison. When the power went out, there was a few seconds before the emergency generator kicked on. Everything was dead. Everything was black, and I lost everything. In the darkness, someone started to sing. One of the inmates started to sing. As they started to sing and clap their hands and join in and worship together while the lights were still out, once the generator kicked on and the power came back on and I had a chance to reload and reboot my computer and start everything all over again, they'd already sung a couple of worship songs. And what that taught me week after week, then I could hear them singing as I got off the elevator on the second floor where the dorm for the programming was located. As I stepped off the elevator, I could hear them singing down the hallway as I entered the building, because they had entered into worship and started worship on their own. So I learned a very valuable lesson, not to be so religious about what I think I should be doing, and allowing them to participate even more and have even more ownership of it was very, very beneficial in that situation. Now the next bullet point is step study for program components. Step studies are designed to help one work through each of the recovery principles. The step study is conducted in a small group setting and may include worship. If limited to a single session of 1 hour per week in a correctional facility, a step study lesson can be accomplished. In all cases, begin with prayer, and either the 12 steps or the 8 principles of Celebrate Recovery also include an allowed verbal review of the group guidelines. All of the lessons can be completed in about 6 months under this option. It may be necessary to alternate a step study group with an open share group weekly if only one weekly session is provided by the correctional facility. I'm going to show you again some examples of what I'm talking about. The materials we're discussing, this is the Celebrate Recovery Leaders Guide. And this is the guide that's used both for the church programs and for any leaders that would be teaching Celebrate Recovery inside of a jail or prison. So this would be your guide with the 25 lesson plan in it for whatever leaders are planning on teaching the program. Then there are 4 of these participant guides for the church level. I'm missing 2. Somebody has taken my other 2 at one of the training classes, but there are 4 of these for the church programs. Now what's been fantastic with Zondervan's help is the 4 of these were put into one book for the Celebrate Recovery Inside program. I'm going to have the ordering information available at the end of the presentation as well. Zondervan has helped us with this also, only charging what the printing cost, $3 a book, costs for these. Now, in lieu of doing this, and what most facilities do is they establish a standard of attendance by keeping attendance sheets. You'll want to do this, even if you just do something in PowerPoint or Excel, to establish attendance, because I can't tell you the number of times that I've been contacted by parole or probation to verify someone's attendance to Celebrate Recovery Inside, because they have a certificate, and Indiana has awarded some time cuts with the certificates. So we have been asked to verify attendance, and we've been asked to verify attendance from the prison staff, because once they're out on the count letter to come, they can double check with us to be sure that they're still attending the program. So what we've kind of come up with, and I believe Hector thought of this idea, is until you get to a point where somebody's got enough attendance to be given one of the books that I showed you, one of these, you give them a half-page bulletin, similar to this, which is available in the Advanced Leadership Training Guide. Now, I'm going to show you the Advanced Leadership Training Guide in just a minute, but you can give someone a piece of paper that is the same curriculum, comes from the same material, and I'll get the Advanced Leadership Training Guide, which looks like that. Paul's doing a fantastic job of zooming in, zooming out for me. This was all impromptu for him, and I want to appreciate him for that. But the Advanced Leadership Training Guide, and most of your church programs already have one of these on site for you to use. So within this is the video set that also has all of the, you see noted here at the bottom of the video set for the training materials that you'll need to do the bulletins. And then it's all printer friendly. You can download it onto your computer, it's all printer friendly, and you can print off the bulletins that you need for the program. Now, this particular bullet point also mentions reading the small group guidelines. Now, many people at the church level will also laminate these, and this is an example of that. Traders Point Christian Church, which is one of our larger Indianapolis groups, I want to thank them as well for their support. But they've actually made these, and these are good to take in and out of a facility and use to read your small group guidelines off of. So there's a couple of the things that I mentioned in that one bullet point. Now, number 3, the bullet point number 3 of programming components, is open share groups are designed for the newcomer to provide an opportunity for participants to share their personal feelings and thoughts on the lesson or testimony. The open share group is commonly conducted following the worship, lesson, or testimony component. If limited to a single session of 1 hour per week in a correctional facility, a short open share group can be accomplished. providing that worship is limited. In all cases, begin with prayer and either the 12 steps or the 8 principles of Celebrate Recovery. All those are all available in that advanced leadership training guide I just showed you as well, and downloadable onto your computer so you can carry a laptop in and out with you and have the PowerPoints available. Also included an allowed verbal review of the group guidelines. It may be necessary to alternate an open share group with a step study group weekly if only one weekly session is provided by the correctional facility. Now within these 3 components, we're giving a lot of different variations of how you can try to mold the program. One of the early programs that I taught, we had an hour and a half per week, and after opening prayer, worship, reading the 12 steps, and then going into a lesson, I could teach 2 lessons because you don't have to read the 12 steps again, you don't have to open in prayer again, you don't have to do worship again. You can come out of one lesson, go straight into the CR Inside book, and start to discuss the questions and the inmates' feedback, and then you can teach a second lesson and still be done in an hour and a half. But then you're excluding any testimonies. So you can still mold some of that and get through all 25 lessons, even in a county detention center, in under 3 months, if that's what you've got to do to accommodate it. A correctional facility that provides a minimum of 2 separate 90-minute time slots during the week, or 3 hours total, can adequately present the above and just previously discussed listed program components of worship, open share, step study groups during a 6 to 8 month time frame. Okay, the next fade in is materials and bulletin handouts. Now I've just shown you, and I'm just going to quickly, I'm not even going to ask them to zoom in on the material again because we've already done that once, but I'm just going to quickly review this with you again so you can see it again. The materials we use is the regular Celebrate Recovery Leader Guide that's also used for the church programs. And then in place of the 4 participant guides for the church programs, we have the CR Inside book. That's all 4 of the participant guides in one book. And by establishing a guideline for attendance, then you can use a half-page bulletin instead that comes in a printable version right out of the Advanced Leadership Training Guide to give to someone until they reach that attendance standard that you set within the facility. Then beyond that, we also discussed worship using iIntegrity worship DVDs, their own praise and worship team within the prison. It's a fantastic thing to go in and have the prison have maybe a drummer and a keyboard player, and the day you go, you've brought a lead guitarist and a singer. And all of a sudden, you've got a praise team, and watch God move and how these people can fit together to do praise and worship, and they've never played together before. A couple other things I want to mention here under the materials as well is the Celebrate Recovery Bible and a paperback version. This is the paperback version of the Bible that is approved by the Department of Corrections in Indiana. This is available, it's a Zondervan published document as well, and it's available on the International Bible Society website, and these usually only run about $2 to $3 for this particular Bible. On Amazon.com, the paperback version of the Celebrate Recovery Bible, as well as the Life Recovery Bible, can be found in paperback version on Amazon.com for a fairly reasonable amount. So those are our materials that we use. The next bullet point on this is leadership training. So here's really the basis of leadership training. Anybody out there watching from an outside program that's not real familiar with Celebrate Recovery yet, my full recommendation is for you to attend a one-day training seminar where the National Celebrate Recovery Training Team travels the country and even the world now doing one-day training seminars for Celebrate Recovery people that are interested in becoming leaders or starting a program. This is a fantastic opportunity for you to meet the national team personally, plus get the best training available for Celebrate Recovery interests. So I can't say any more, and I've attended many, many, many of them, and every time I go, I get something from attending the leadership training that's available from the national team. So don't miss out on that. Log on the Celebrate Recovery website for the upcoming dates near where you live. Indiana is hosting those Celebrate Recoveries now. They go all over the country and even around the world now. So log on and see where it might be closest to you to be able to attend one of those. It's very affordable, especially if you log on early. The price goes up the longer you wait to attend. But you can also do in-house leadership training as well. If you've got some training of your own from the Celebrate national team, you can also use the materials I've shown you, the Advanced Leadership Training Guide, the Leadership Training Guide, and begin to train your own leaders. So, and as the inmates are taking ownership of the program within the facility, you want them to grow. So if you've got a program in Miami County Correctional Facility here in Indiana is one example that comes to my mind. We had Celebrate Recovery going on there, and this experience also happened to Hector at Sierra Conservation Center. After everything had settled in, a couple years had gone by, you had leaders trained, and our volunteer here, Dave, called me and said, Larry, I don't know what I'm going to do. They're splitting up all of my guys. And what happened was, indirectly, it spread Celebrate Recovery all over the prison and not just in one block, because all the guys that had been trained then took it everywhere they went. And then I had to find more volunteers to facilitate the program, with the chaplain contacting me and telling me they were doing Celebrate Recovery on their own in some of the cell blocks because they didn't want to give up the program, even though they'd been moved out of the cell block that facilitated it. So you want to start to look for your replacement. This is in the Celebrate Recovery curriculum for anybody, even in church programs. You immediately start to look for your own replacement as a leader. And maybe that's somebody inside. Maybe it's somebody else outside as a volunteer, but you don't want the program to stop just because you can't make it. Life happens, kids' soccer games happen, deaths in the family happen, so don't let it hinge so much on you that it's your program. It's not. It's God's program. And you're not going to reach people if you don't have the coverage to keep the program going without you. So let's move on to the next set of slides about the team. That begins with the T. The T stands for the training coach. That's the role I'm playing in Indiana right now as the training coach. The training coach will train the group leaders on how to lead an open chair group, how to lead step studies, and how to continue to bring more inmates into leadership positions as they complete the 12 steps and want to continue to help others in the program. They may also conduct new participant orientation. This person will develop and train an apprenticeship coach who will be able to assume that role when the training coach leaves the institution or program. The next letter is the E, which is the encourager coach. If you'll advance to the next bullet point, thank you. The encourager coach will help group leaders to be consistent in the content of the sessions, recruit and develop others to assume leadership roles, and generally see to the care needs of the members. An apprentice coach will be developed and trained who will be able to take over when he or she leaves the institution or program. You're going to hear me repeat that for every position. The next bullet point is A, the assimilation coach. The assimilation coach will promote Celebrate Recovery to the members, to the other inmates and staff. They may recruit new inmates entering the institution. Group facilitators may be interviewed by the A person. New groups information may be communicated to the membership by the assimilation coach. An apprenticeship coach will be developed and trained who will be able to take over when he or she leaves the program. Okay, and the A might also fill in as somewhat of an aftercare role as well. And then the last bullet point for the team is the M, which is the ministry leader. This person is typically someone other than an inmate who will be responsible for the entire Celebrate Recovery ministry at the institution. That person's got to be responsible for the gate passes for the equipment and the materials, making sure that what they're bringing in is okay. All those things need to be covered. So I think they lost my camera view. One second, please. We've got a little bit of an equipment problem. Oh, and we're back. Okay. So the M will select and schedule presenters for the large group lesson. It came back up. oversee the other coaches and will intervene as necessary to keep the program on track. This person will serve as the main contact with the institution, the volunteers, and the inmates. Okay, now we're moving on to the next slide group, and this is possible prison group issues. Now, a lot can be said. Let's just read from what we've got available here. In custody, step studies may consist of, but are not limited to, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, anger, sexual addiction, codependency, gambling addiction, overcoming sexual, physical, and emotional abuse, and exiting a lifestyle of risk. Step study groups may also consist of general hang-ups in order to facilitate the start of a new group where various issues might exist. You've got to keep in mind that I love the way the Division of Mental Health is moving in this direction, that a person's addiction is not about the substance. It's about the behavior that's led them to the substance. And if these folks that are incarcerated, and by the way, I'm an inside-outer. I was in the level 4 prison 11 years ago myself, so I can tell you firsthand that if you don't work on the root behavior, it can just manifest itself in another area of your life. That could be gambling, that could be anger, that could be sexual addiction. So that lifestyle of risk itself can be an addiction. That thought that I've been getting away from, and I've had to look in my rearview mirror for years thinking I'm running from the cops, and it may not go away just because they're incarcerated. They may have found new ways to risk their income as little as it is, risk their commissary as little as it is, and exiting a lifestyle of risk is a very real component to this and possible prison group issues. Now, I want to share some statistics with you before we move on to some other areas. Some of these statistics come from Prison Fellowship, and I thank God for Chuck Colson, who passed away. I want to give honor to him. Losing Chuck Colson with Prison Fellowship was a big loss to our cause. We're very thankful for him carrying the mantle the way that he did. And some of these statistics come from the Prison Fellowship information. National average for a one-year stay in the Department of Corrections is about $43,000 a year of taxpayer money. Our Indiana average is about $36,000 a year. Statistically, we have also found that if an inmate leaving a facility, transitioning to the community, isn't getting plugged in the first 48 hours to a positive community-based programming of some kind, in the first 48 hours, it's 88% likely that they'll be back re-incarcerated in 150 days. That's huge. That's the people that live down the street from you, that sit next to you at church, that you're walking through the grocery store with and you don't even know. And if they're not getting involved in the first 48 hours in something positive for themselves, they're going back, 88% of them, in 150 days. Now, again, a lot of people like to use the buzzword, and I don't even like to say it, but recidivism. The Pew Institute did a good study on recidivism. If you look it up on the Pew Institute's website, be ready. When you download it, it's a huge report. But basically, in a nutshell, it's very difficult to track recidivism because inmates can move out of state, and it's only tracked in a state level, and sometimes even the states can't track it from facility to facility. So they transition to the community, get locked up again, and go back. Now, the only statistics we do have available are these. They typically don't track total arrests on people until after the second arrest, because many people can be arrested driving home from an office party or for various different things and only be arrested once or twice in their life. But after the third arrest, they have been able to start tracking statistics on people. Now, here's some really big numbers I want you to take note of. After the third arrest, it's 83% likely that someone will get a fourth arrest. After the fourth arrest, it's 85% likely they'll get a fifth arrest. After the fifth arrest, it's 89% likely they'll get a sixth arrest. After the sixth arrest, it's 93% likely they'll get a seventh arrest. After the seventh arrest, it's 96% likely they'll get an eighth arrest. And after that, it's broken down into tenths of a percent. slowly increasing and getting closer and closer and closer to 100% likelihood, which we call institutionalized. Now, the transition to the community is huge. If you go on to the next bullet point, please. Possible prison group issues still, and within all of this is still committing crimes, the lifestyle risk that we mentioned. Okay, the next bullet point. Risking all of one's income. Maybe they've become a gambler to gamble for commissary. Spades and Tonk are some of the favorite card games that are played, and you'll see this happen where they've blown all their commissary just within moments of getting it because of back debts. So they may not have exited that lifestyle risk at all. The next bullet point. Driving in a reckless manner. This might be what got them there. Okay, and they're not able to do it anymore, but as you talk with them and find out more about why they're there, driving in the reckless manner might be at the root of what got them there, and they were running from the cops because they had drugs in the car, or running from the cops because they were drinking. Go ahead to the next bullet point. Joining gang activities. This is huge in becoming involved in the lifestyle of drugs, alcohol, and abuse inside a prison. Anything you can get outside, you can get inside. As an inside-outer myself, I don't want to talk about in detail or at length the things that go on inside a facility, but gangs are very prevalent. The things that go on with people's own sexual preferences are inappropriate, and drugs and alcohol are prevalent. You can make your own alcohol in a jail or a prison. I personally witnessed alcohol and drugs being snuck in, even into baby diapers in the visitation room. So if they're not working on their root behavior before they transition to the community, how can we expect them to be any different when they get out? The next bullet point, please. Promiscuous sexual behavior. I quickly alluded to that, the inappropriate behavior that occurs inside. I won't go on into that any further. Let your imagination run wild, and unfortunately you probably still can't grasp it in your mind, the things that can go on inside. The next bullet point. Now, transition to the community. If they haven't worked on all those previous bullet points before they transition to the community, once again, as I said, how can we expect any central behavioral change to have occurred? There's irrefutable evidence that has proven that an effective transition from incarceration to release has been the primary failure of our penal system worldwide for alcohol and substance abusing individuals. Therefore, Celebrate Recovery Inside must include an effective community transition to ensure the participant's success. One of the greatest benefits for local CR volunteers is seeing the impact Christ, our higher power, has made on each participant. However, an inmate's changed life inside a well-structured environment is severely challenged upon their release to an unstructured community environment. The reality of life on the outside introduces new challenges related routine activities they have not experienced for some time. Remember, they even have people telling them when to go to bed, the lights are automatically shut off, telling them when they can go to the bathroom. So once experiencing freedom without that controlled environment, this can be very overwhelming. These challenges include, but are not limited to, their housing, clothing, finances, and relationships, compounded by reporting and testing requirements of parole and probation. Now, this is where Celebrate Recovery should shine like a light in your community, and if they've participated inside, should be help to be that bridge to transition out to the community. The biblical verse we use here to refer to this is Matthew 5:14 through 15 that says, "You're the light of the world, like a city on a mountain glowing in the night for all to see. Don't hide your light under a basket. Instead, put it on a stand and let it shine for all to see." The ideal time to establish a CR Inside sponsor in the community is upon the release of the person incarcerated. Go to the next bullet point, please. Every releasee needs a sponsor. Indiana calls it a mentor or an accountability partner. Now let's talk a little bit about boundaries, and we're going to get into this a little bit further in just a moment, but if every releasee needs a sponsor or mentor or an accountability partner in the community, how do you correctly do that? To correctly do that, you rely on the Celebrate Recovery Church programs and all mail is funneled through the church address only. You never give, ever, without any exception, your personal address or your personal cell phone information. You can establish within 6 months of an inmate's release contact with them through the mail, and you can't be a volunteer going in the facility. If you're one of the volunteers going into the facility, you cannot establish contact with the offender through the mail prior to their release. In Indiana, this is not allowed. It's illegal. It's one of those things that in your heart you want to help. In your heart you think everything is fine, and you start establishing contact with an inmate through the mail prior to the release, and you're trafficking. And it is a crime in most states. So you need to do this correctly. You need to set boundaries. Most of what has been lacking in offenders' lives is boundaries. You may need to be that person that sets the example to show correct boundaries to this person. So they need a sponsor, but what you need to do is go to your area Celebrate Recoveries, AA meetings, NA meetings, CA meetings, and talk with people about those that are not volunteers for your program, about them being community sponsors or community accountability partners, and then funneling the mail through the church address only to have contact with that person. But I want to challenge you that this is a very critical part, that if it's done correctly, is a very critical part of that inmate's release and transition into the community. Now the next bullet point, every releasee needs plugged into CR and church. Now, you know, the key part here is we're not trying to promote and Celebrate Recovery as all-encompassing. We come together of all different types of denominations and beliefs, and we're not trying to force our beliefs on anyone, but the importance of us coming together to try to make a difference of these offenders transitioning into the community literally is, as I said earlier, these folks are coming out of prison every day, whether you're aware of it or not, and could be moving in next door to you, sitting next to you in church, you're bumping into them at the grocery store or the bank, and if they're not plugged into something positive, CR, church, recovery, anonymous meetings within the first 48 hours, that statistic is huge that they're going to be going back. So these are things that I can't stress enough that we need to really take advantage of and get permission with the facility to carry in listings of Celebrate Recovery meetings available in your state and in the area that the inmate's going back home to. AA, NA, CA listings from wherever your international website is for your state there. Take those listings in at every opportunity you have with the permission of the facility to carry that information in with you. This is huge. We can program people to death, but if we don't make an impact on their transition to the community, we've really wasted our time. Okay, next bullet point, please. Keep going. Now, if you're looking at the download bulletin that I sent out, there's a great graph that's got 2 tables on that bulletin that show the differences between accountability partners and sponsors. So go ahead and arrow forward. Now, one thing I want you to note, and I want you to read this on your own time, please download this bulletin. The differences between accountability partners and sponsors. If you have questions about what that is, please read this material. I'm not going to take the time, in the interest of time, to cover every one of these differences and every one of these bullet points on these 2 tables of information, but please download this and read this. But what I do want to stress to you are these bullet points. Accountability partners and sponsors should be establishing contact 6 months prior to the offender's release. The next bullet point is set and keep boundaries. I talked about running mail so that you can have the 6-month contact with a former inmate or soon-to-be former inmate through the church mail. If your Celebrate Recovery is at a soup kitchen or a Salvation Army in the community or a transitional house in the community, then all the mail should be getting run through a public address and not your own personal address, as well as not giving any of your personal cell phone information. That should never be given to an inmate, as well as being very careful about what you share as far as information about your family. I discuss having family members and having children, but I never talk about it being their birthday or what their middle name is, or inmates are not in there for going to Bible study. That's not what they've been locked up for. And with nothing but time on their hands, if we haven't filled their hands with something good and a positive influence on them, then they have all the time in the world to think of ways to do identity theft. And this is a very real problem. You need to set these healthy boundaries for yourself so that this doesn't occur for you. Now, there's been many different stories that have come, many different testimonies for and against the way the boundaries need to be set. Only you know the best way to do this in your own communities. I just really urge you to set and keep boundaries. If you set a boundary and break it, then there wasn't a boundary at all. And this even includes someone coming from an inside program to a Celebrate Recovery Church program or any other community-based program, and you identifying them. You know, you've just violated their anonymity, and in your excitement of wanting to say, hey, look, our jail program's working. Look, so-and-so's just come to our program from inside the jail or the prison, and you've just violated their anonymity, broke all the boundaries that needed to be set for them with other people in the room. So I just really want to encourage you to think through this process. And in doing so, as an inside outer myself, telling you that I've witnessed and seen inmates take yellow pages, write 200 letters to church organizations asking for $5 to buy a pair of glasses, reading glasses, so that they can read, and send 200 letters out asking for $5. Now just do some percentages in your head, and even if only 10% of those church organizations respond, and then that church organization thinks they're heavily involved in prison ministry. They're sending $5 to an inmate somewhere to help him buy reading glasses to read the Bible. And really what's occurring is they're getting manipulated. So the boundaries issue is huge. Set and keep healthy boundaries. It's going to do the inmate good, it's going to protect your community, and it's going to protect you and your family. Next bullet point, please. We were just talking about this, protecting the integrity of the community, yourself, and Celebrate Recovery. What good would it do for someone to go through Celebrate Recovery inside, go to our Celebrate Recovery in the church program, and you haven't protected the integrity of that person and that CR and the community? I think really the worst victims in this situation are the children of the former offenders that come out, and the offender comes out, comes home and returns to the children, and then they're going to a church community program, still don't see any real boundaries getting set for their parent that's just recently released. And unfortunately, those kids may grow up not seeing much benefit in what has occurred. We need to think of those types of consequences, and we need to set and keep these boundaries. The next bullet point, please. Stick to the DNA of Celebrate Recovery. This as well is huge. Celebrate Recovery understands that you've got to modify this curriculum to fit the facility challenges. Celebrate Recovery understands that. But the overall goal is to meet and stick to the Celebrate Recovery DNA as much as possible. If you're curious about what that DNA is, you just need to attend some of the area and community Celebrate Recovery functions and meetings. I want to encourage you to attend more than one. Go to more than one in the community so that you can see it modeled and see what the overall goal is. And then based on the facility limitations and what the DNA is, you try to meet somewhere in the middle that is something that is functional and beneficial to the offenders and to the facility. So stick to the DNA as much as possible. Okay, next slide, please. Now, in your bulletin handouts that I sent you, what you're going to see on the next couple of pages is Hector has provided guidelines and formats for you to look at. We've talked about open share groups, step study groups, large share groups, And what I've included in this bulletin for you is Hector's outline and the Celebrate Recovery DNA that we just talked about. So if you'll download and print this bulletin, you will see over the next couple of pages, you see the open share group format, which is the DNA for it. An example of the small group guidelines are also on that page. And then the very next page, you'll see a step study meeting format, as well as small group guidelines for that. If you continue on, and the next page is what we're going to talk about next, is the rules of engagement and sort of the do's and don'ts of what can occur. Now, first of all, Celebrate Recovery churches should show Christ's love as much as you can. And sometimes, especially as an accountability or sponsor, you show love. AA calls it tough love at times, especially if you see someone coming out of a facility and they're already violating some of their parole or probation guidelines. You got to show Christ's love in a tough way sometimes. The next bullet point is treat the person as you would all others. Remember not to identify them. Treat them as anybody else that's attending your Celebrate Recovery or your AA or your NA or your CA group. The next bullet point is select mature sponsors of the same sex to assist the person. No exceptions to this rule. A sponsor a sponsor for sure should be gender specific. And in Indiana, we've even made all of our volunteers gender specific. There's only women that go to the women's facilities and only men that go to the men's facilities. We've just, over the years and over time, have had situations occur that we just know it's been detrimental to the ministry and to Celebrate Recovery and not beneficial to the inmate themselves when we've allowed any kind of gender crossing for, even if it's just been men that participate in the Celebrate Recovery Praise and Worship element. We've done some good jobs at times where if a guy's gone in with the Praise and Worship team, as soon as the Praise and Worship's over, he's been escorted out by the correctional officers. We've done the best we could in some of those situations, but we've just learned over time it's just better to keep it as gender specific as possible, and women going to the women's facilities, men going to the men's facilities, as well as anyone being a sponsor or a mentor. The next bullet point is integrate them accordingly into a group encouraging involvement and Celebrate Recovery. Now, I've talked about some of the downsides because I want to protect you as a potential volunteer. But at the same time, we want to remember to try to integrate them accordingly into an encouraging support group. So that is just as impossible or just as important as any of the other bullet points we talk about, that they remain thinking they're useful. They might have even developed into leadership at an inside program, so you don't want to discourage that, but you do want to use the guideline once they transition out into the community that they're not placed into leadership in a community-based program for at least a year, and that you monitor their attendance during that year to be sure that they're going to be faithful, they're going to be reliable, and they're going to be somebody that you want to call a leader in your community-based program. Now the next bullet point is utilize other churches or community agencies to help with unmet needs. This is where collaboration with the food pantries, the food banks, the Salvation Armies, you name it, list it, have some of those resources available. We can't be the end-all to be-all for everybody, but the more resources we have available, and even if all we know is where the nearest food pantry is available for them to get some food to get on their feet, or the nearest Salvation Army that can maybe even provide some clothing to get them started. And then maybe by going there for that resource, they find some more available at that resource. So collaboration with the community-based programs and agencies is very important. Don't think that you're going to be able to get a list of everything for everybody. It's just not going to be able to happen, and you're probably going to wear yourself out trying to provide everything, and you can't be everything to everyone. But getting a good base is very important. The next bullet point is display both grace and accountability as equally as possible. Love and accountability, again, as I said, tough love can be a very important part of this to keep somebody in line and keep them accountable after they've transitioned to the community. One example might be if you're seated at a community-based program of some kind, and a former offender that you knew had participated in Celebrate Recovery comes, sits down with you, and an inappropriate comment might be made about a female that's there. You want to stop that right then. You want to talk to them right then and say, hey, look, that's inappropriate. We love you. We want you here. But at the same time, you've got to be accountable. And also, that's not what we're here for. We're not a dating service. We're not here to help you to find your next ex-wife. So we're here for recovery. But you can do that in grace and accountability at the same time. The next bullet point is be aware that the person has come from an environment of manipulation. We've covered this a little bit, but I like to cover it more than once in this training because it's that important. They're not there for going to Bible study. They may have honed very good skills at being very good manipulators, and you have to be careful of this. I'm not saying that they're all that way, but you've got to be aware that that's the kind of environment they've come from. So there may be some things that need to be addressed and some things that need to fall off of them as they're coming to your community-based program so that they come out of that kind of mentality. The next bullet point is assess their background in CR to develop both strengths and weaknesses. Now with their permission, again, and they say, well, I participated in Celebrate Recovery at Putnamville Prison. And that's another one of our state programs here in Indiana, been very faithful. We can double check that with the attendance sheets that have been completed at those facilities. And even if they've said they've completed leadership training and got a completion certificate for a one-year program, and they give you the permission to check on that and find out, we can double check that and find out. Assess their background. Don't just take their word for what they're saying, but you can assess it, and then that can help you know more of how to fit them in what's going on and what's available in your community. The next bullet point is check with probation parole staff regarding restrictions or special conditions. Now again, this is something that needs to be done with the offender's permission. Now one example I want to give for this is if you have an offender coming that's still on house arrest or home detention, as it is called in some states, he may have limitations on what his attendance can reach in the evening of when he's got to be back home by a certain time. So if he mentions to you, hey, can you please contact my home detention officer because I would love to be able to stay, and complete the second hour of group so I can go to small group and talk about the things that are, really bothering me. Now with his permission to contact that home detention officer to get permission, they may want you to be accountable to be able to verify his attendance. So keep that in mind that you may have to be able to verify that if he's given permission to do that. But with that person's permission, you do want to contact and find out if there's any special restrictions about time, and usually, and again, if there's somebody on a sex offender registry, it's something that you don't want to promote within the Celebrate Recovery in the community, but it might be something that's information that you need to know about that person. Now you can't tell them that they're not allowed to come. It's no different than them being allowed to go to the grocery store or church. But with their permission, if they ask for you to contact about certain specifics, knowing there any kind of restrictions about that person is good information to know about, to protect the person, to protect, again, the integrity of Celebrate Recovery and the integrity of your community. Now the next bullet point is keep on loving the person even when they're unlovable. Remember, they're going to come back, many of these inmates are going to come back wanting to step right back into their families as fathers, as husbands. It's going to be a difficult transition for them because they'll still have some accountability to the legal justice system. And trying to figure all this out, there can be some irritability. They're trying to adjust back to a different environment again. So keep on loving the person even when they're coming grouchy and appearing to be unlovable, and realize there's a huge transition going on in their life and they need some grace and love to help understand that. Now the next slide, we're going to go into the things that you should not do. Okay, the first one is give personal money, goods or services, unless you're equipped to give it to everyone. Now here's what I mean. Here was one good example at a county jail located in Montgomery County, Indiana here. I had a person that was a volunteer at that jail program who said, you know, I bumped into a guy who knew my dad and the business my dad had, and I caught myself starting to discuss it with him at the jail. And he got caught up for a second because this inmate knew his father's business. They began to stand there and talk about it a little bit, and he realized, oh, wait a second, I gotta hold on about this, because the inmate was a client of his father's at his father's business. So you can't talk about an agreement of any kind of money, goods, services, and even in some of your best thinking, without the permission of the facility. You can't offer jobs. Maybe you're a volunteer that's got your own framing business and you could use workers. Okay? What I would recommend you do is don't be a volunteer at the facility. Talk to the volunteers at the facility and the facility about having permission to refer some of the inmates to you once they're released. But you can't be that dual role in an inmate or offender's life and offer those services to people while you're a volunteer. Again, that's trafficking. Okay, then the next bullet point is offer to take them home with you. Now, I'm not going to specify the state, but I will tell you that there was a couple that were Celebrate Recovery Inside representatives that went a little too far in offering their home and some housing to some inmates, and then they both had to go to a job-related training for a week, and while they were gone, everything disappeared, and when they came home, the only thing left was the livestock. Don't offer them to come to your home. You know, find the resources available in your community for transitional housing units. Talk to them about coming into those transitional housing units, but don't make your home a transitional housing unit for an ex-offender. Next bullet point is openly announce that that person is an ex-offender. We talked about this. Oh, look, our Celebrate Recovery Inside program is working. Johnny's coming to our church program. Praise God. You know, no, you just violated all their anonymity, and you probably broke some of the boundaries they would need for their own safety. So you allow that person to talk about their own testimony on their own time and when they're comfortable with it. And when the timing comes and they release that information to the group or in a small group setting, then it needs to stay there. Just as much as confidentiality and anonymity are important in any of the anonymous meetings, it's just as important in Celebrate Recovery. So you want to protect the privacy and anonymity as much as possible. The next bullet point, deal, bargain, or conduct business agreements with ex-offenders. I touched on this about the personal money as well. One other thing on kind of both of those is we do, as much as it's difficult to make Celebrate Recovery Inside as uniform as possible because of facility challenges. One thing you don't want to do, even with permission of the prison, if the prison's giving you permission to take donuts or drinks in for your Celebrate Recovery meetings, and that inmate attends Celebrate Recovery at that facility and transfers to another facility for one reason or another, and then they go to the other facility that may not allow it because every facility is different, then their expectation is going to be there that that's what they want. So if you're not able to provide it for everybody, if you're not able to reach that agreement with every facility, the best answer is no, and don't do it. We want to be as uniform as possible, but we understand the facility restrictions. The next bullet point is allow inappropriate behavior to go unchecked. Now I use the example of someone commenting about someone else at something going on in your community. You want to talk with them immediately, you want to address this immediately, and you don't want it to go unchecked. Again, protecting the integrity of the community, the program, and the person. The next bullet point is don't appoint or place them in leadership for at least 1 year. Now I've already discussed this. Again, it's important enough to mention again that you monitor what's going on, look at their attendance for at least a year, and then see where they can effectively fit in further. Now, you don't want to tell them that they can't participate in any form or fashion for that year. Give them assignments. There's plenty of work to do in many areas of this ministry. Setting up chairs, making coffee, helping with food preparation. There's uncounted number of things to do. And by the way, you can't think that you're going to be able to do it all on your own anyway. You'll burn yourself out. There are things that they can be used for and utilized in until they get that year up after the release, and then even if they've been trained as a leader, then can transition into a leadership position after that year. The next one is volunteer any information to others about their reason for incarceration. Now, I learned a long time ago in this ministry and through my own statewide jail and prison ministry that I've been blessed with, that I don't even ask. I don't even ask an inmate or offender what they're there for. That's not what I'm there for. I don't want it to change my view of them in any way. A good illustration of this was I mentioned that I recently did a Kairos weekend. I sat at a table with repeated murderers that have no hope for parole. But I never once asked any of them what they were there for. Now what you will find is people like to talk, and they like to talk about themselves. You probably won't have to ask what they were there for. They'll probably end up telling you anyway. But the key is that they offer that information at a time when they feel safe to tell you about it, and that's when it should happen. The next bullet point is inquire why he or she was in prison. Sort of the same thing over again. You don't want to ask that question. The next bullet point is conduct your own investigation of wrongdoing and contact the appropriate authorities. Now, here's what I mean by this. I had a phone call from an area Celebrate Recovery church program that said, we've got a sex offender coming to our Celebrate Recovery. What do we do about this? I said, well, what do you mean? Well, I mean, he's coming to our Celebrate Recovery. What are we supposed to do about this? I said, well, how did you find out that he was on the sex offender registry? Well, we've got law enforcement that attend our church, and as soon as he came to our church, we had him run a background check on him and found out that he's on the sex offender registry. I said, did you have that person's permission to do that? And the young lady said, no. I said, is he going in any area of your church where he'd be around younger people, children, or females at all? Have you noticed any of that behavior at all in him? Well, no, but we do have kids that come. We have the Celebrate Recovery Celebration Station curriculum that we use. And I asked her again, I said, but have you seen him in any inappropriate area anywhere? She said, no. And I said, then why have you done this investigation of him? If there's no indication of anything going on wrong, and then it was made public. The information was made public within the leadership of the Celebrate Recovery and within the church. You've got to be very careful about this. If there is wrongdoing that occurs, you should definitely investigate it. But if there's nothing wrong going on, then don't set yourself or your community up for a possible lawsuit. This is a very fine line where praying for the right discernment of how to react to certain situations is critical for your leadership team to pray together about this. And the next bullet point on this is encourage the inmate to talk against authorities. Now listen, you don't want to get caught up in one of these discussions where you're standing around with an inmate and find out that they had the same judge that you had on a speeding ticket. Okay, and then you're standing there and you're complaining because the judge didn't give you a break, and the inmate's complaining because the judge didn't give them a break, or parole or probation officers, the same theory. We don't want to model an example of them of disrespect to our authorities. We have to fall under the same rules and guidelines they do, and it would be better to show an example, again, a boundary to them of respect. They probably have just come from an environment where it's very common to disrespect their authorities, and it'd be better for us to model the respect model for them than disrespect. Okay, that's the last bullet point on that. Now, those of you that have printed off the version of the bulletin for yourselves, the last page that you'll notice is how to order the Celebrate Recovery Inside materials. Now, real quickly, I'll just go over this with you, just in case you've not been able to download this bulletin to go with this slideshow. Purpose-Driven Resource Center, you can call 1-800-723-3532. So you can call that 800 number. You can contact Hector Lozano, who is the national representative for Celebrate Recovery Inside. Hector's email address is hectorl@saddleback.com. You can get online there or email Hector or call, and then the materials are available in Spanish as well as English, the materials that I've shown you today in the webinar. Now, one more thing I wanted to cover before we go also is, and hoping that maybe there was even going to be maybe a question when I open it up for questions in just a minute, and thank you for being patient, but is the juvenile version of the curriculum. Let me grab that. The juvenile version of the Celebrate Recovery curriculum is called The Landing, and this is an all-inclusive packet of music videos. The skit guys are on here, just fantastic, good, clean humor. You can see some of the skit guys' material even on, by logging on the Celebrate Recovery website. But the landing kit is being used in Indiana by Madison Girls Correctional Facility. We had a realignment of the facilities here in Indiana a few years ago to create more bed space under a federal mandate. And they moved our girls' school, which was known in Indianapolis for many years, to Madison, Indiana, where we have a women's prison, and we already had Celebrate Recovery functioning as a ministry, Celebrate Recovery Inside, in the Madison Women's Correctional Facility. So the volunteers asked about getting the curriculum as soon as it was released, and Johnny Baker that year at the summit was just so gracious in making sure that I got a copy of the landing curriculum to bring back home, and it was immediately implemented at the Madison Correctional Juvenile Facility, and it's been used ever since there. There was a newspaper article written about the success of the program there at the Madison Juvenile Facility, as well as we've had a lot of interest, from the Logansport Juvenile Facility as well, where we've even had some of the leadership there at that facility that have inquired about it. They've looked into finding area volunteers from the Salvation Army in Logansport as well, and they're using some of the curriculum, but it's not a full-on program for the landing yet, and we continue to pray about that. But I wanted to tell you that there is a juvenile detention center curriculum available called The Landing. It's available on the Celebrate Recovery website for materials to use. It's a fantastic program. We're seeing some good success with it here in one facility and a second facility considering the use of it, and great support from the state with it as well. Now, some of the other materials, the Division of Mental Health, SAMHSA has things available that are very good. Here's a very good one that is about teenage huffing. A big growing problem with our teenagers is huffing, and huffing the computer cleaner, other household chemical items. This is a fantastic curriculum to get as well, and it's available through humanrelationsmedia.com. So hopefully I've answered a lot of your questions, and before I actually close the formal part of this webinar, I just want to tell you that I'm a living testimony to what volunteers like you watching today can do. I was in a level 4 prison 11 years ago myself. I lived as an atheist all my life until that point, and we're almost literally to my 11-year anniversary of being baptized, giving my heart to the Lord, and Him turning my life around. And if there hadn't been volunteers like you watching available to go to the facility where I would probably still be in prison or dead today. Thank you. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for your interest in this program. Thank you for your interest in anything that can help an inmate. Because without people like you, my life wouldn't have been changed. So thank you. Now here's on this slide as well is my email address. You can email me or Lori that you met. Lori takes care of the women's facilities in Indiana. I take care of the men's facilities in Indiana and the training. So once again, I want to thank you. I want to thank Aspen for hosting this training. And at this time, if you need to go, this is the end of the formal part of the training, but I encourage you to stay on for any questions that anybody might have. If there's anything that I haven't covered, there may be some very good questions asked. So if you can stay online with us for the question and answer period, please do. If you can't, you got to go. I really appreciate you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. So what questions do you have? Anyone out there? Type in the chat box. Apparently there's some audio problems if you'll type your questions in the chat box. Thank you, Kathy. And they can still hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you. Thank you again for hosting. Marcia, you missed the first half hour. Could you review it in a nutshell? Yeah, basically the first half hour what we covered was the history of Celebrate Recovery beginning in 1991 at Saddleback Church. I can expound a little bit more on that for you as well. John Baker, who is the founder of Celebrate Recovery, wrote Rick Warren a very famous letter now that was 13 pages long. John, not really knowing he was going to be the one that Rick would say, go ahead, John, do it, on a Post-it note back to John. But John had been sober 4 years in AA and found that he couldn't talk about his faith at AA, but at his men's groups, he couldn't talk about his addiction. And so Rick Warren and John Baker then got together, developed Celebrate Recovery, started in 1991 at the psych ward, the psychiatric ward of a hospital. And even with the stigma that would come around going to a recovery meeting, they still had people that came. And I think it was 42 people attended the first meeting. I believe that information is available as well on the main webpage. But that's how it all started, and that's what we covered in the first half hour.
And Marcia, this training will be available on the Aspen Learning Management System, recorded for your viewing pleasure. So if you want that to get that first half hour verbatim, just go tomorrow probably and check the Aspen, go to the Aspen website, log into our e-learning system, and it will be available there for you.
Anyone?
Yes, you know, I'm glad you asked the question, Kathy, because the CRS, the Certified Recovery Specialist Program, and for those of you that might be accessing this through the Celebrate Recovery Inside newsletter from across the country, Indiana has a program called Certified Recovery Specialist, and it's a peer support specialist type of program. And there's many different states that are doing a peer support type of program. Indiana has the CRS program with the support of FSSA, DMHA. Bruce Van Dusen has really helped to pioneer this with Aspen. But in being a peer, there's, and please don't take this in the wrong way, any of you watching that aren't in recovery or haven't been incarcerated, but there's an element there when you can sit down with someone and say to them, I'm an inside-outer too, and understand the challenges that some of those people are going through on your own individual basis. There's something there that is missing just by someone going to a program that doesn't have inside-outers there available. So this CRS has been a huge part of this. I would encourage anybody that's got a peer-supported program in any state that's logged in at a later time to view this, to check into whatever peer-supported programs your state has available. If you're here in Indiana viewing this at a later date, contact Aspen about the CRS program available here. It's been huge for us. There are many Celebrate Recovery volunteers that have taken this CRS training that has been very beneficial for them. Very good question. Thank you for asking. Anybody else? All right, well, again, I want to thank you, and if there's no one else, I'll give you a couple more seconds before we totally wrap it up. Yeah, there is someone? Okay. Thank you very much, and I want to try to say your name right, Shrame. Thank you, and again, you can go back and review any of it over again. Contact me if there's any other questions you have, feel free to. Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, thank you, Kathy. I'm certainly going to intend on trying to keep up the good work, and support from places like Aspen, from the DOC, have all made it possible for me to continue to do this. And, in my 11 years of release, it's just been phenomenal that I've had contact with 2 of our sitting presidents about prison ministry work. So, with the Lord's help, I intend on carrying on the work as much as He deems it necessary. Anyone else before we go? Well, again, thank you so much. God bless you, and have a good rest of your day.
And thank you, Larry. And I just want to remind all our participants that this training will be available on the Aspen Learning Management System probably within 24 hours of this particular time. So thank you all for attending, and we'll see you soon.